Welcome back. This is still the BDTV Breakfast Show, and I've got in the studio with me Mr. Mohammed Akonji to help us, review the front pages of the newspaper this morning. Good to see you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much for having me. How are you doing?
Very
I didn't
well.
see you here yesterday. How was okay? Maybe you just decided to be able to take a bit of a break off or what?
So what's a good thing?
And Norma did a very good job. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. And
Always a pleasure.
it's really nice to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
At least we woke up this morning to, as the papers and the news is always washed with the latest development. But I think the striking thing for me there was, as we were discussing behind the scene, was the speech that Trump just finished early this morning at the Capitol building. And 6 weeks, you don't forget, we're just 6 weeks into the administration. He said something, but to me, it has looked like maybe like a whole 4 years already. But he said something and he said, America is done with woke. We needed to be able to get through with the brokenness, and that's why Doge has come to stay. So, the woke system, the woke mentality, or the woke, what can I do to call that? Maybe the woke, that frenzy around the woke, and now it's about the broke system. So, broke, in terms of America's brokenness system, will be killed by Doge, Elon Musk. And he said one very important thing. We have achieved in 43 days. That's actually just the number of days he has spent so far. He has achieved so much in 43 days than the previous administration and the subsequent ones have done in 6 or 8 years. Right. But I would like you to be able to watch the speech. And it was very, in fact, one of the congressmen was actually bundled out, a Democrat, because he was protesting with Republican. And one of the congressman, Hal Green, was actually bundled out of the Congress yesterday. But it was, early this morning, because, maybe early this morning that it happened, because I was watching that before I left home after my early morning meal. And so,
early morning meal. Oh, okay.
No, I meant for fasting. Sorry, I'm just so I just quickly have to usually watch CNN and BBC, and I saw some of the snippets, of what he said and things. Yes, and then at least we see that then the Ukrainian president came back to the drawing board now, willing to be able to sign the deal with Trump. The peace deal, the Russia-Ukraine war. Remember the fallout that they had on Friday. So I think he backtracked yesterday to say that he's now willing and ready to work with Trump, and then we'll see how that will be able to pan out.
Certainly, we'll definitely be looking out to see all of the amazing and interesting things that
this new
administration is coming on board.
They're always able to come up with every day one new thing that will always
be. There's a new thing, and I think I like it. It's exciting. It might be a little bit unsettling for the Americans, because you're like, you sleep and wake up, you're like, what's new?
What's going to happen this morning again?
You're like, you don't know if the rain is going to fall, the sun is going to shine. What's new this
Now, what exactly is going to happen? Because the way it's not saying like everything we did is just hit back to back to back to back. This one is just back to back to back.
It's exciting for them. I'm sure they're looking at me like,
what are you saying? In fact, the opinion, the popularity ratings, there was a popularity rating that was actually done by Pew Research to talk about his how popular he is. And I think his presidential popularity rating has actually dropped to about 40%. So this was a number about 3 weeks ago, that was at around 70%, where people are happy with what he was doing. But what that rating does is just to be able to indicate how acceptable are your policies, I'm talking about Americans, how acceptable, approval rating as they call it, what's the approval rating like, how popular are those policies. So if that's up to 40%, I think you should send a signal.
When you talk about popularity and all of that stuff, just before we go into the papers, because we're already doing about that. The conversations around Trump are quite interesting. People say things like, "Oh, Trump is that president that no one likes," but they
cannot do without this, of course,
from his policies.
Especially evils, okay.
Even when they complain about all of these policies and whatnot, I have like a couple of my friends who are
American who are there, of course, okay.
And they tell me every single time that, look, forget all of the things you're seeing online.
People are happy with it.
They are benefiting from this policy. Like, is returning some sort of sanity and normalcy to the system. So people might not like his personality and how he goes about it, but he's bringing in
those things that people wanted.
Things that people want. So here's the thing with being
being eccentric as a person. Okay, that kind.
Like a
nobody likes.
You just want to like appeal to everyone and just be like the
okay.
It's you could kind of maintain a status quo.
Okay.
That is not.
You know what I'm saying there? What I'm saying there, Liz. So yesterday, in fact, I think when I was left in the office around 8 o'clock or thereabout, I think the news broke about Canadian Prime Minister. In fact, I have to be able to call him. We didn't call him President Donald. I have to call him Donald because yesterday the tariff he imposed on Mexico, Canada, and China took effect yesterday morning. So they woke up. I think they were trying to see if it can be averted, but so he gave them a deadline until 3rd of March to ensure it is effected. But I think when nothing was done, the tariff came into effect. So the Canadian Prime Minister, who is even leaving by March 9 next week, have to be able to call a press conference. And it was was saying, Americans, we are very sad that we are imposing this tariff on you, like a counter tariff, a trade war. But we have no choice. Your government, if I'm quoting him, your government brought these on you.
Right.
You know, and of course, you know, and everybody wanted to say, okay, let me now be able to now address a particular American. In fact, he mentioned the word. Let me address, and he said, Donald, this you're doing, we have been friends. And so you see a way he was actually trying to be able to come and then hitting him hard. It was just a press conference that virtually all the media outfits had to be able to carry it yesterday night before he went on the Capitol, U.S. Capitol State of the Union address that usually that every president is expected to be able to do before the end of the first quarter. So you see, even Canadian prime ministers, I mean, countries within the North American region that felt like, oh, we've been friends for a very long while. But some of us we have no choice because we started this, you imposed tariff on us. And so the deals between them is about $150 billion worth of trade that's gone between US and Canada. And they said at least the very first $45 billion, the tariff has gone on those. And that will be able to affect, and the guy was actually reeling out the effect of what's going to be on typical American producers, American workers, and American consumers. So I know it's the thing there is it's between a rock and a hard place, and I'm sure that's what it is. So before he went there, of course I can agree, he doesn't appear as someone who is less concerned about what people are saying about him, because if you watched the exchange, for example, that happened at the Oval Office on Friday, I'm sure you'd have seen the video. You know, I don't expect the typical president to heckle down on a fellow president like that.
It was looking like.
Okay, what do you? As if you're speaking to.
It's like you're speaking to
your puppet, a student.
You're talking to like your subordinate.
That's what I'm saying. But remember, that's another president of another country.
Other president. Granted, you guys are leading.
And the vice president could be saying that is disrespectful. You're not thankful. So you know he has that, and he never, and immediately if he left from there. There was supposed to be a mineral deal. You just have to cancel everything.
The Ukrainian president that asked the Vice President J.D. Vance and asked him a question, you know, when it was.
What is diplomacy? That's what I'm saying.
And he had asked him, "Oh, do you know the things? Have you
been there? Exactly. I've not. He just said, "I have been." No, I have not. But I've seen it. I've heard. That's you're just talking here. You're talking about diplomacy as in work. J.D. Vance. So if a vice president could have that metal, that effrontery, you know, to be talking to another president like that, it could be that they are indebted building to you.
On social media to say we truly like the way everything
panned out
was not.
And that's why he was there to say maybe because he has no choice anyway.
But he has kind of considered.
Of course, that's what I'm saying. He has considered now.
Long, lengthy message on Twitter.
Maybe the way I'm sure this guy will just be licking his Putin right now to say, "Come." I mean, because I think the next line now, since he has said he's agreed to be able to go into the peace deal. Initially, it was like, okay, US should recognize or should be able to hold vehemently the point that Russia is the aggressor. But Trump is not trying to be able to buy any of those. But I know it's a whole lot of things that actually be able to pan out and unfold.
Absolutely. Let's see what we have on the papers this morning. Let's start off with the Business Day paper this morning. This is the Business Day TV breakfast show, and this is where we review some of the front pages of our dailies. And that one we have right there says multinational shareholders brace for year of zero dividends. I wonder what that means. And then we see another one that says leaky pipelines plunge Nigeria LNG's gas supply by 80%. And then another one on the bottom left says telcos growth drag on FX losses. Yeah, that's that. And then another one talks about developers losing appetite
for build-to-let
properties. But let's start with the big story that says multinational shareholders brace for a year of zero dividend. What do you know about that story?
Oh, no, of course. I think it was just what happened last year, and we expect that most companies by the end of the first quarter, their financial year would end. And with foreign exchange losses that a lot of them, complained about last year, that most of these companies, especially many multinational companies, suffered as a result of the foreign exchange challenge that we have. Many of the shareholders, there was a very, very marked drop in dividend availability, dividend declared. Remember, dividend is more or less like the returns that the shareholders actually be able to get on their investments. So the shareholders of some of these multinational companies are, bracing up for perhaps another year. The year 2023 that's completed in 2024, when most of the companies, look at MTN Nigeria, Nigerian Breweries, for example, International Breweries, PZ Cuisines, couldn't be able to declare enough revenue, enough profit after tax last year because of the foreign exchange challenge that we had. And remember, the Naira stability just started taking effect, right? We just to be able to see some level of exchange stability since the January of this year. So a whole lot of them suffered quite heavily, and they were quite hit by the exchange rate, foreign exchange losses that happened as a result of the volatility of the exchange rate. So that is likely going to be able to feed in back into their books, and that eat up significantly in what is actually going to remain, even before the profit before tax. The profit before tax already has been heavily affected. So by the time the taxes are paid, what is actually left as a PAT, profit after tax, may not actually be enough, to be able to declare enough dividend on. If you see what most of them declared last year, MTN, for example, one of the grounds, that they canvass for tariff hike, for example, especially in Nigeria, is as a result of operational losses that they suffered last year, and that the shareholders were not at least moderately compensated in terms of returns that they get on their investment. So, as I said, by March, we know that several companies will be calling up their AGMs, their annual general meeting, where those profits by March, because some companies run their own 12 months from April last year to March of the following year. Some can actually be from May to April. So most of the time, usually around from the third quarter, you tend to see the AGMs of companies coming up, where those profits are to be declared, and then the dividends will also be equivalently declared. Now we know that local companies, the only major thing there, the exceptions are the indigenous ones, local companies. Those are actually playing within the regional, within the national space. Those ones are kind of benefited anyway, because we've seen what banks are quite an exception in this particular case. But the main reason, or the main challenge, that impacted most of them, actually the losses, the accumulated losses that they've actually seen from from foreign exchange losses. And the NGS report showed that. I think, in fact, it was mentioned here that the accumulated losses of most of these multinationals alone, rose to close to about 1 trillion naira, about 900 billion that they suffered, as at December last year. And if you compare it to 2023, please, 2023 was just about 247 billion. And that impacted them from not declaring enough dividend for the shareholders. So if it jumped, if you look at the NGX website, that value jumped from 300 billion in 2023 and now to about $900 billion. It can be 900 billion naira, I meant to say, sorry. So you can likely see the impact that will have on the dividend. They've not started declaring it yet. Sure, several of them will start, as I said, from by next week or thereabouts. I think I heard this morning that some companies have already been able to announce their AGM that will likely be able to take place.
Right. Let's also just check out what we have on the other stories. It says leaky pipelines flood Nigeria's LNG's gas supply by 80%.
80%.
And then exports declined by 40%. What does that actually mean for Nigeria?
So recently, LNG, the liquefied natural gas, who is actually the parastatal or the government agency that's actually in charge of some of these pipelines, have actually been hit with operational crisis, especially in the Bonny Island, and that has actually continued to be able to drag on. They've had this problem. I think we discussed about this maybe last month, exactly.
Yes,
but
certainly.
That problem actually started November last year in the Bonny Island facility. So, and that have affected their gas supplies, because don't forget, LNG too is another vital energy institution, just like NNPC. NNPC is actually in charge of oil, but they are primarily in charge of gas. So the report was actually broken by Bloomberg, yesterday. Yesterday, that about close to 80% of the supply of LNG has actually been affected as a result, of pipelines that are leaking, especially the ones that they tend to be able to put there. So that prolonged disruptions, as the major cause of those leakages have actually been attributed to vandalism, maybe in the Niger Delta, worry. Some of what they actually have in LMA as well have been affected. So pipeline vandalisms, has affected their production capabilities, and that has tend to be able to reduce their commitment to export. Just like you said, export has actually been able to decline by 40%. So if you look at Bloomberg, compile some data to be able to see that some of these spot prices, people that won't be able to pay for those items, exporters or countries that have actually be able to pay, are not able to get deliverables of what they are paid for because of, the inability to be able to meet the contractual agreement. I'm talking about from them. The analysis from Bloomberg, I think one of the conclusions there was that they said they are working around it because they're experts and the engineers are already trying to be able to, fix some of those leaky pipelines, some of those things. But as they were trying to fix some, instead another two happened again. I think it was not last month, another one again. Another leakage happened again where some people deliberately vandalized those things, And that is exactly where the need to be able to pipeline surveillance that NSCDC have actually been earmarked to be able to work on. So needed to actually be checked. So most of the partners, most of the buyers, from LNG, especially from Asia, Bloomberg actually reported that in fact some of them are actually threatening legal cases because when they could not be able to get the product that they have actually be able to pay for. So we call that spot transactions. Okay, you have this to sell, I pay for it and I get it. But LNG has been unable to be able to meet that because of, some of these leakages that have happened. So, in fact, the least they could produce are just to be able to meet local demands as the president has actually been able to instruct them. So the need for energy security is really, really very important. I think going down to that, away from that was the story about the developers. Was it developers? I think that's another thing. I put that as well. This is another story where rent defaults has been a very big problem. A lot of them have been complaining about. So remember, some of these developers, they build to let, they build to buy. Build to let, buy to let, and the house for rent agreement or segment or that particular component of the market has been heavily impacted lately. That is no thanks, little thanks to the current economic challenges that we are facing in the nation. I think it's affected a lot of them. I'm sure you told me your experience here about some of the premium buildings or premium locations where a lot of them were actually be able to grapple over that. So the way most of the investors were lamenting, Mr. Chuka, who reported this particular story, if I do some interviews with some investors who are putting money, you understand, into it, and the promise of returns they've expected to get, unfortunately, they have not been able to get it.
I think it will be interesting to really read that report
and then
because
check what
I'm
was
wondering where these people are investing. When we're talking about developers losing appetite for building to let properties.
Because people are not paying because of default.
I'm curious really to know, where our property editor had mentioned like the areas, because I think that we still really have a very thriving
real estate market.
Real estate market. Okay. If you're even speaking on to let properties.
So look at what he mentioned here. So to him now, the most affected in terms of that segment are office buildings, malls, grocery stores, low high-rising and other types of residential buildings. But it's across Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Kano.
Yeah, it was important for us to mention that part of offices because that's a conversation we had last time. That the office buildings, especially the amount they cost, you know, the investment put into
those
they're not able to
get
recover
returns.
it. So investors literally, it's like they're wasting their money.
Of course, when you're not getting returns on what you have invested in.
When they
so
see that,
it's really scaring a lot of them away at the moment, you know, because what I'm saying is the Eldorado they were promised. Don't forget, you know, who felt like, oh, there's housing deficit in Nigeria, because one of them here, in fact, said one of the things they told me was, oh, there is a 17 million housing deficit. So this is a good ground for you to invest. You understand? But maybe when you look at the housing deficit, look at
a good ground to invest.
But how many people can afford that? Okay.
Residentials, mostly for residential. However, for offices, malls, and all of that stuff, it can be a little bit tricky because.
But how many can pay for the residential building? What is the core problem?
Yeah, that's also a little bit.
Maybe that's the challenge. How many can afford to be able to pay?
It's more viable than the offices and all of that, because here's the thing: you have offices that are going like really luxurious office buildings in Ivory areas like here in Ikoyi, VI, and all of that stuff. But then, how many companies can afford to rent those buildings? You know, because for companies, you're going to be paying,
service charges, utility fees,
all of that, and then you're going to be paying your staff, and that's why what we have is. You find people in lovely buildings and they're earning very meager salaries, and they're wondering that what
are you doing
like
in this
big contract
between what we're working
position in a very key
location.
But the thing is, you have to do everything, because you position a key location, but then you might not be getting all of the patronage, or you're not getting you know
that kind of
you're not getting so
because you know it's a business strategy as well. It's a very dicey situation.
Thought out
very clearly and explicitly.
There is something that people do. I mean, we've spoken about this before. So you could move a little bit further down to Lekki Phase 1. You could move a little bit further down to Chevron. You're going to be spending less. You could move a little, no, definitely not Aja, but then you could move a little bit further down to Lekki Phase 1. To Chevron.
No, you know, Jack, what is what I say? So you see, in fact, most of what we have are like shared workspaces.
Yes, shared workspaces.
That's what people are not doing. Maybe companies can now be able to now join.
Want to, you know, position there, because then you think about, oh, you're telling your client, you know, it depends on the kind of company it is.
Okay.
If it's a real estate company, all of that, you can be there. But you have to understand
the market, that segment,
market,
the realities of what happens there.
Certain companies, you cannot be like a I don't want to mention any brand.
Of course, okay.
And you cannot be and then
say that
you have to be in a central area. So then you have to think about it. Are we going to do a shared space? Are we going to do
you know, maybe flexible work model whereby we only use it 2 days or 3 days?
There are central places on the mainland, right? You could do an Ikeja.
Okay.
It's still expensive.
But
it's
expensive
too.
It's
still very expensive, but it might cost. But so it's really offices, because I think for housing there is that market. Every day people are buying houses and renting houses.
So because the question is, if you now ask what they're now saying here is, so most of them, they got attracted into the investment because they believe though it's businesses, small businesses, you know, tech startups, you know, that feel like, oh, they have opportunities of actually be able to be cool. But I mean, these are companies or these are businesses that have the potential to be able to make money. And so that attracted most of the investors to see. But of course, the reality is coming down to them now. People are not defaulting. Friends are not being paid. You understand? Tenants are just there. In fact, those that are on buy to let, you know, I mean, those that are on buy, they build to let. That okay, even lent it out. I mean, they let it out to some people, and then you eventually pay for a period. There are reports here that a lot of them have not even been able to pay for those that have in residential buildings. Then coupled with small businesses, tech startups, you know, those ecosystems too, have not been able to meet up with their obligations.
For the rental buildings that are for residential. There is also a little bit of a concern there, because there are still buildings that are ridiculously priced.
Overpriced? You mean overpriced,
yes.
Right? Okay.
And then people cannot even afford it. But speaking of buildings, just very quickly before we go, let's see what we have on the Guardian paper this morning. The Guardian paper is quite interesting. So speaking of buildings, we'll see what we have on the Vanguard paper this morning.
Okay.
The Vanguard paper and some other newspaper, they have that particular headline all over the place. So we're talking on buildings. Now there's a building there.
This is a high-rise skyscraper.
Yes,
we call this skyscraper.
It's in
the Atlantic City.
Apparently, it's the tallest building now in Nigeria. It says First Bank holds groundbreaking ceremony for new headquarters today. certainly these ones are not the target audience we're talking about, because they definitely have the money.
They're building it themselves.
I mean, to build it themselves. So that's the thing about companies just starting up, and then you want to roll with the sharks. Like
exactly.
You need to go within
before you know it, you can get swallowed up.
But it's really beautiful to see that building, and
I think that's the CEO there, Mr. Libioshi, right? And you see that's great.
So you can see that
so really be good to have, a sneak peek as well as good
spread of the paper, and I've seen another paper as well that has
did that as well today.
They've certainly
put complete front page.
Yeah, they've definitely put in some for this, but it's amazing to see that from First Bank. But let's see what we have on the cartoon of the day today. It's always a good way for us.
So they're just laying the foundation today, right? Okay. Are they
laying the foundation? No, it's already.
We're saying upon completion, yes, they're saying the 40-story building will have the honor of actually being the tallest building in Nigeria. Okay, maybe. So it's not yet completed.
I think it's completed.
Okay. Because I was just looking at some of the stories. Some of the stories, they're about upon completion. You understand?
I think
so
it's
maybe it's also
slightly completed.
Partly okay. It's a work in progress.
Already like moving. You know how when the headquarters of like the TVC had their
but actually I've checked them, and then it's a work in progress, and then they complete it while it's there.
People are moving in already. Some people
are somewhere else, and then they can come back in. Okay,
like that. But let's see what we have on the cartoon of the day this morning. That is a looks like a cable car.
With River State House of Assembly and Lagos State House of Assembly.
River State Assembly and Lagos State Assembly, and then Aso Rock somewhere in the corner.
Looking at them, with a very rapt attention. The crisis, that is that has befallen these two houses. I think it's just a reflection of what is going on. LSHA, because today is the deadline given to President Governor Fubara to present the budget. We don't know what's going to be able to happen. It is a place. River State today is a place to watch out for. Yesterday as well, before Lagos State House of Assembly went on the indefinite, the definite prorogue of the House, the definite adjournment of the proceedings. There was a little bit of a fallout between the speaker, the new speaker, the re-elected speaker, I think it was re-elected, and then the members of the floor about during statement of the sacked clerk of the House.
Right.
He was saying they had to bring him back, and the other members of the floor were saying no. We don't know how that matter ended, but there was a bit of a face-off over that about with the clerk, just like because he was feeling like I am back. So the clerk of the House too, who was actually sacked before a new clerk came on board, but he got a judgment from the court, so they had that face-off. So, but what is the role of Aso Rock there? Maybe Aso Rock has actually remained a little bit tight-lipped, not saying anything. But you see that a lot of people, if you're not careful, are being dropped out of the cable car, as you can be able to see there. So that means it is a really fight to finish.
I call it the battle of the assemblies.
It is really.
We hope that we don't have another a battle with National Assembly. That would be the height of
Maybe it is, because remember, this is why we're going on. You had what former senators, Florence Zagiwa said yesterday about the issue between Senator Natasha and the Senate
also
President.
Have it going on. A lot going on.
So there's a lot going on there too.
Yeah,
it's another house.
That Nigeria should be on Netflix. It seems like we're always having one thing
one issue. Yeah, it just keep unfolding, and a new development happens, and then we tend to be able to have all those. But you can see the cable car. If you're not careful, in fact, the pressure on the cable car itself, you can see the people there.
If you're not careful, it's going to cut.
It is just going to be able to cut off before you see it. And then people nearly falling off.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to see that as well. We've seen casualties
every now and then. Literally by the I don't know how they're even hanging. They're already almost down.
So you can see the governor there with them. The Lagos State for the House of Assembly.
And Aso Rock is just playing some sort of neutrality, or is it diplomatic?
Fight further away.
Ambiguity.
Or maybe were they the ones, controlling the cable car? Look at the rope that can likely snap, because it's looking like it can snap. The cable can.
If they're not careful, and that's just the message here.
Yeah. They're really working. They're really working.
Mr. Asuko for always doing justice to those cartoons, and that's how we bring it to wraps here. Speaking of cable cars, River State Assembly, Lagos State Assembly, you should watch The Big Story, where we'll be talking all about the River State Assembly. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's always a delight. And that's how I bring it to wraps here on the newspaper review on the BDTV Breakfast Show. Do stay with us.